We have a special guest with us, former NBA star Juaquin Hawkins. So let me tell you a little bit about Joaquin. Hawkins has played in 5 different countries, which consist of China, Taiwan, Japan, Philippines, Australia. And he also played in the minor leagues, but his dream finally became a reality when he started playing with the Houston Rockets in the NBA, while becoming the second oldest rookie in the entire league that season. He continued his play for quite some time after his NBA season in Japan and Australia, respectively. While playing pro ball in Australia, Juaquin Hawkins would unfortunately suffer a devastating stroke that would change his life forever. Going through a year and a half of speech and physical therapy would follow along with several other never-told life-challenging events. I hope you read this book, Stroke of Grace, by Juaquin Hawkins. So let's welcome to the show. Welcome, Joaquin.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fascinating story, unbelievable. But before we get to the event of the stroke and all that, I wanted to find out a little bit more about you. And I know you're a father. You have 3 children.
Yes, I do.
That's wonderful. Let me ask you this. How did it feel when you finally got picked up by the Houston Rockets?
Well, obviously it was a dream that came true, but it was awful. It was so surreal because I really patted myself to being the best player that I could be, the best person I can be. But when I was able to actually make it to the NBA and actually play against the best players in the world, it was definitely something that only can happen in dreams. And it was one thing that when my dream did come true, I just took it for what it was, and was able to be blessed for the opportunity.
I can only imagine. And were you married at the time?
We were engaged at that time. I've been knowing my wife since we were 14 years old. Went to the same high school.
Oh, wow.
College. Yeah. And we actually were just about to have our first child. And so, that summer after the NBA, that's when we finally tied the knot and got married. But, I've been with my wife, for some quite time before that time in 2002, 2003.
That's a heck of a year for you. Houston Rockets, married, a child. Wow.
It really was.
A lot of blessings in that year.
Indeed.
So let's talk a little bit about what happened with the stroke. What happened there?
Yeah, well, it was definitely a life-changing moment. I was playing in Australia with my professional team, and we just had a game actually the night before. We won the game, and the very next morning, I was preparing with the rest of my teammates to board a flight because we had another game at the next city, which was in Townsville, Australia. And so as I was going to go brush my teeth that morning, I remember getting a tingly feeling on my fingertips, and my tip of my fingers went from my fingertips to my palm to my whole arm becoming quite numb. And so I just kind of wrote it off as maybe sleeping on my arm the wrong way. But obviously I had no idea that actually I was suffering a stroke, and those were the actual symptoms of a stroke that later that I did find out that I had. So it started as a normal day for me, and then the symptoms persisted, in a matter of minutes, and I went from having a tingly feeling in my fingertips to my entire right side becoming immobile, and actually ended up laying on the ground. It seemed like for quite some time, just trying to regain my balance.
And how old were you at this time?
I was 34 years old. Yeah.
Oh my
34
gosh.
years old. Still playing professional basketball at that time, and I had this life-altering event that was happening to me in every minute. I had no idea that it was persisting and getting worse, and so unfortunately, I didn't get to the hospital until the next day, and that's when my worst fears was told to me that I suffered a stroke and had bleeding in my brain, ended up having other symptoms where I had to stay in the hospital for a week after that. And so my road to recovery began.
That's amazing. So you didn't go into the hospital until 24 hours after?
Yeah. Because I didn't know the symptoms, and my team managers and coaches, they didn't know the symptoms, and once I did regain my feeling of my right side, I was told to board the plane with the rest of the team to the next city. So actually, after I had the stroke, I had to board the plane and went to the next city. And when I finally got to the next city, which was about maybe 8 to 9 hours after that, I went to the doctor, and they gave me basically an IV of fluids. They didn't take any neurological testing or any blood testing to really see what those symptoms were from. And it wasn't until the very next morning when I woke up and I couldn't hear in my right ear. And that's when I knew something was still terribly wrong, and finally was able to go back to the hospital. They did a CT scan and found that there was bleeding in my brain. And so doctors told me my worst fears. That not only my basketball career was over with, but that I had suffered a stroke at 34 years old, and I wouldn't be able to play anymore.
Oh my gosh, terribly scary at that moment. And I don't know if I can't remember correctly, but I think the faster you go into the doctors after a stroke, the better recovery it is. And so the longer the delay, the harder it is. And you've recovered, haven't you, physically?
Yeah, but believe me, it was a long road of recovery. Yeah, I didn't know until afterwards. You normally are said to get, to have 3 hours to get treatment after having those stroke symptoms.
Exactly.
So that so it wouldn't your recovery wouldn't persist. But as I said, I didn't get the proper medical attention and I talk about this in my book very in detail. I mean, every moment. There was about 27 hours before I finally got the correct medical attention. And so when the doctors did finally diagnose me, they told me that I would have to stay in the hospital because, again, I had to undergo other tests. And so I was in the hospital 6 to 7 days, and I mean, actually my symptoms got worse, where I didn't know the difference between a circle and triangle.
Oh, jeez.
I couldn't say my alphabet, and it was just very hard for me to communicate. I mean, I had a really bad stuttering problem, and my memory. I had 3 girls at that time, and it was. I talked about this in my book as well, but it was very hard for me just to remember my girl's name, and so I was just hoping and praying that I was able to recover enough, just to be the father that I wanted to be for my kids, instead of being the athlete that I always wanted to be.
Absolutely, and I want to make sure, and I want to try to see if the producer can get that book cover for us, The Stroke of Grace by Juaquin Hawkins. Fabulous. I mean, it's a riveting read. You're reading through this, and you can really feel the anguish you were going through during that time. Unbelievable. And I'm assuming your children are probably petrified to see their father like this.
Yeah, they were, especially my oldest daughter at that time. She was 5 years old. And,
okay.
We talk about it even, to this day. She's 13 right now, and, she still remembers. I had problems remembering her name and her sister's names, or, sometimes, we'll all be in the same room, and they'll be calling my name, and I couldn't hear them. And it was just because my memory and my hearing was bad. And so, they were able to learn about the symptoms of stroke, during the actual time of my recovery. So, it's kind of a blessing in disguise, because now they know what the symptoms are. And, if me or mom or anybody else, that we're around have these symptoms, at least now they know what those symptoms are.
Absolutely. Big difference. And it sounds like you were almost consciously aware of what was going on during your stroke, in the sense of, were you aware that you couldn't tell what a square and a triangle were? Were you aware that your memory was failing?
Yeah. It was really mind-boggling, because
Yeah.
I knew, even when I would say certain things, I would go from one subject to another subject, in the split of a second. And I knew it wasn't right, but I couldn't control it. And the persisting of me stuttering, it was inevitable. No matter how slow I talked, it was still, I was mumbling. My words were not clear, and my hearing was very, very bad for a couple of years. It wasn't even something that just was temporarily. It was actually for a while, where I was having these issues, since the stroke. And but now I know. I mean, those are things that happens when you do have a stroke, and then obviously if you don't get to the hospital sooner than later, then it is a good chance that those lingering effects can be a part of your life. And so that's part of the reasons why I did write the book. Obviously, I do a lot of speaking engagements, and hopefully one day I actually can be able to have my story become a film where people actually can see the different situations that I had to go through, being a stroke survivor.
Absolutely. You're doing a wonderful thing. It's a great cause because it does, I think people don't realize, it doesn't seem like much is going on at the moment of the stroke, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like much is going on. You don't know if it's maybe something you ate or your arm fell asleep. You really don't know what the heck is going on, but the effects afterwards can be devastating.
Yeah, it really can. But and not only just for the person that suffered the stroke, even for my wife.
That's true.
She actually had to become a caregiver. Raising my three daughters at the time, they were 5, 3, and 1. And here I am, a 34-year-old, professional athlete that just had a stroke, and now she had to, tend to me as well. It definitely became a more of a job for her to make sure emotionally and physically that I was okay, and very draining for her. Even for a couple of years, it was very draining. And so, I'm very, very blessed to say that I have a wife that stood by my side during my darkest times.
Absolutely. There's nothing you can do to replace that. And let me ask you this about, how did your faith play in all this?
It was definitely a challenging time for me as far as my faith, because I've always been a God-fearing man and been always thankful for the blessings that I did have. And this is one time where, I already made the NBA. I've almost achieved every dream that I always wanted, having kids of my own, being the father I never had. And all of a sudden, I couldn't function. I couldn't function as a human being. I didn't know what my future would hold. We unfortunately became homeless a couple of years after my stroke. We were actually living in a hotel. My wife, 3 daughters, and my mom. All 6 of us was living in a hotel for almost a couple of months. And so my faith was definitely, challenged. And, I had to really just pray daily and really just begin to believe once again that God wouldn't put anything on me that He knew I couldn't go through. And so my wife, my children, my mom, our faith together became stronger, and I finally believed that we would get through those darkest times of our life, but it really took for me to become even more faithful and more strong, and I was able to do that. And it took a couple of years, but through the grace of God, it's nothing like the time of understanding and going through those times and being grateful as well. So it was definitely a challenging time for me, but I'm glad that we were able to go through it, because it made us become more stronger individuals.
Yeah, it is. It's unfortunate you have to go through those kind of times to be able to become so much stronger in your faith, but it definitely does strengthen the faith and the bond with God. Absolutely. It reminds you, I guess, of the book of Job.
Right.
Yeah, tough times. Stroke of Grace, fabulous book. I recommend it for everybody. Juaquin Hawkins. Joaquin, where do we go to find more out about you and your book?
Yes, you can go to www.strokeofgrace.org. The book is there, and then also I run my own youth basketball program.
Oh, great.
And I have about 60 kids where I teach the fundamentals of basketball, but we also, it's a club travel team where actually I take the kids and we travel every other weekend to different cities to play in basketball games. So I'm doing mentoring throughout the week with these kids, and you can go to hawkhoops.org to learn more about that program I have.
Hawkhoops.org?
Yes,
hawkhoops.org. Strokeofgrace.org if you want to see his story and his book. Hawkhoops.org if you want to get your children or anybody else's involved in basketball to learn from a pro.
Yeah.
One more question, if you don't mind, sir. Thank you very much again for doing this. Last question. What advice would you give to the people out there who are overcoming challenges? We always like to ask our championship athletes like yourself and others, because you guys have a certain mindset that's
Right.
geared for that. What do you give your advice for the youth out there? What's your advice?
Yeah. Well, accept that challenges are a part of life. I mean, it's nothing that we can do to stop the challenges from coming in our lives, but we have to adapt to them and understand that. And again, you become stronger through your challenges. And obviously, I learned firsthand. But just being able to understand and adapt to every situation, and it's never going to be perfect, but at the same time, life is good for all of us. It's a blessing for us to have life, and challenges are a part of life. So as long as we can understand that and move through our challenges, learn from our challenges, and always be there to help others, you will have a life of many more blessings.
Absolutely great advice. Strokeofgrace.org. That's where you can find this fabulous and riveting book by Juaquin Hawkins, former Houston Rocket. You can also look him up at hawkhoops.org if you want your children or somebody else's to learn basketball with a professional. Thank you so much, Joaquin. We truly appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. You guys have a good day.
You too. Fabulous interview, fabulous person.